On the 9th day of the month, at evening, from evening to evening, you observe your Shabbat. Now, people will say, ha ha, there, Sabbath, Shabbat. Evening to evening, you observe your Shabbat. Case closed. But not so quickly. This is a special Shabbat. And we have to understand that the word Shabbat does not define the time period of the Shabbat. For example, we have the Shabbat day. We have the Shabbat here of the Day of Atonement, which starts on the evening of the 9th and goes to the evening of the 10th. Now, if the 10th starts at the end of the 9th in the evening, and all days begin this way, why does Yehovah have to spell out to the people that this Shabbat is a special Shabbat that goes from the evening of the 9th to the evening of the 10th? Evening has a different meaning than what we have been told. Evening is what we would equate with the afternoon. The afternoon and the morning are the two parts of the day. We also have a Sabbath that lasts for a year. In the Shemitah years and the Yovel year, the land has a year-long Shabbat. And then we have the ultimate Shabbat, which is for eternity. It never ends. Yom Shekelo Shabbat, the day that is forever Shabbat. What is interesting about this Shabbat is that the scriptures say that it will be a time of perpetual light. There will be no darkness during this eternal Shabbat. Just like there's no darkness in the weekly Shabbat. Another verse used to discredit the sunrise beginning the day is Nehemiah 13, verses 19 through 21. Here we see the closing of the gates in Jerusalem during the days of Nehemiah. And it came to be at the gate of Yerushalayim, as it began to be dark before the Shabbat, that I commanded the gates to be shut, and commanded that they should not be opened till after the Shabbat. And I stationed some of my servants at the gates, so that no burdens would be brought in on the Shabbat day. And the merchants and sellers of all kinds of wares spent the night outside Yerushalayim once or twice. And I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I lay hands on you. From that time on, they came no more on the Shabbat. We have to understand, the gates of the city were closed every night. Every night of the week, the gates of the city were closed to keep the city protected. It wasn't just something that they did for the Shabbat. The difference is that the gates were opened again in the morning. And so we see that Nehemiah told them, when you close the gates on Friday evening before the Shabbat, doesn't say how long before the Shabbat, it just says it was before the Shabbat. Thursday's before the Shabbat, if we want to be technical. But the Friday night before the Shabbat, the gates were closed and they were not opened that Shabbat morning like they were the rest of the week. They remained closed until the next morning, which would be the first day of the week. because they kept them closed at night. So we see that when we understand the culture of the people, this verse does not say that Shabbat began in the evening. It is only by tradition. Another very important passage, and I didn't write this one down in my notes, but the giving of the daily sacrifices. In the temple, there was a morning and an evening sacrifice, and this sacrifice had to be constantly burning on the altar. It was never to go out. And in the context of that commandment given twice in the Torah, we read in English that the one is offered in the morning and the other offered in the evening. But in the Hebrew, it is very clear. The first, the echad, the first is offered in the morning. The first lamb is offered in the morning. The second, sheni, the second is often offered in the evening. You cannot offer the second lamb in the evening if the day begins in the evening. I even had a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi, he claimed to be on in Paltalk. I questioned him one time on this, and he said, well, in the temple, the day has always been reckoned from the morning rather than the evening. Interesting. Now let us look at the week. In Genesis 1 and 2, we see that there is a 7-day week. And in the calendar of Yehovah, the number 7 shows up in 3 distinct but connected areas. The week, the lengths of 2 of the feasts, the very first feast and the last feast of the year, unleavened and Sukkot, and the number of months that are in the Moedim cycle. Well, as I said, the first cycle, the first Moedim cycle is in the first month, and the the last of the feast days, the last of the Moedim, is in the 7th month. And we have a period of I guess we could say darkness before light is brought about, and the cycle starts over again in the spring. As a side note, I find it very interesting that there are 7 days of the week, something that's not divisible in any of the calendars that have ever been in history. Even in the old days, the pre-flood days of Noah, when the months supposedly were 30 days long, not divisible by the number 7. But yet, Yehovah in his wisdom gave us 7 planets that are visible in the sky in our solar system with the naked eye. The sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, let me think of my Saturn, and Jupiter. Those 7 heavenly beings, heavenly bodies, are visible with the naked eye. And there are 7 days. Now the pagans took this and used it to set about the different names of the week that we have today, and gave them names. They gave the planets the names of gods that they worshipped, and then they took the names of the week, of the days of the week, and gave them those names also. In actuality, in the Hebrew text, only one day has a name, and that is the Shabbat. The rest are given numbers. Day 1, day 2, day 3, on through day 6, and then the Shabbat. Looking at the week in history, Some countries have used a week with a differing number of days. For example, Rome at one point in their history, I believe, had a 10-day week. And then, so they had 3 weeks of 10 days. And then the French, before the days of the French Revolution, had a calendar with 8 days. But this was never implemented by all the people all over the world. And even with the changes in the calendar, there's no proof that the order of the weekdays was ever changed. So, 7 days. It's easy to count. Work 6 days, rest 1. Work 6 days, rest 1. We have enough fingers on our hands to count that far. Now, let's look at the month. Is it the returning crescent or the conjunction? There's a big debate about that. When we look at the Hebrew text of the Tanakh, we see that Kodesh is translated generally as month, and Yerach is translated generally as moon. Excuse me. Yet in 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 1, we see, and it came to be in the 480th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, in the 4th year of the reign of Shlomo over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of Yahweh. Now in the Hebrew, it uses Kodesh there. So Kodesh means month. Then, if we go to 1 Kings chapter 8 and verse 2, we see here, all the men of Israel assembled to sovereign Shlomo at the festival in the month of Ethanim, which is the 7th month. But in the Hebrew, and this is a little hard to read because the text is small, I should have made it bigger, but it uses, in one instance, it uses Yerach, and in the second it uses Kodesh. So both translated month, and both have that same month idea. Even if we translated the one as moon, the Yerach as moon, and said that in the moon of Ethanim, which is the 7th Kodesh or month, we see that they're used interchangeably. Also, the word Kodesh comes from a root word that means renewed. The pictograph gives the idea of in the Paleo Hebrew, the pictograph of the word Kodesh gives the idea of the entrance of the outside, which is sharp at both ends. Sounds very much like the renewed moon, which is the returning crescent. Now I know several people use the astronomical new moon as we see it stated on our calendars today, but I think that is not what the scriptures say, because we have a culture which would see the moon disappear. Would they think it was born again, renewed? No, I don't think so. But then when they look into the evening sky just after sunset and see the moon returning to the sky, then they would say, ah, the moon has been reborn. It has been renewed. So we can see. And this is attested to in the history. I don't know of any websites that I have found that state that Israel at one time looked to the conjunction moon as being the beginning of the month. I'd like to touch briefly on another false doctrine that is being spread about Facebook like wildfire now and across the internet, and that is the lunar Sabbath.